So now that we have everything working just the way we planned it, the only thing remaining that we need to implement will be to fetch the weather icon, right? So I'm going to go to Open Weather Map website. So I'm going to add slash weather conditions. So in this page, you're going to see how to make use of weather icons, right? So for instance, we made an API call to retrieve the weather condition of London. So this is an example of the response we can get, and the icon ID is 10N, all right? So if you scroll down, so you can see that Open Weather Map has a lot of icons in their list. So every ID corresponds to a particular icon. For instance, this is 01D, which is sunshine, and the description is clear sky, right? When we retrieve our icon ID, we're going to use it to query the appropriate icon, and we're going to download the image into our app. And when we download it successfully, we're going to set it on our image view. In that way, our user will be able to know exactly what's happening with the weather. So if it's raining, so we'll have this kind of image icon in our app. I guess this is pretty cool, right? So let's go back to Visual Studio and finish up with this. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and download the image. If you remember earlier on, I mentioned that we have two ways of making web requests, of which one of them is using the HTTP client, which is very handy, very simple to use, especially when you want to just get a JSON response in strings. Let's say for things like downloading an image like we want to do, we'll actually need a web request. So we're going to go ahead and make use of web request to download our image icon. So to do that, I'm going to come here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a small comment that explains what we intend to do. First of all, we need to define the image URL. So the image URL will be, I'm going to first of all define a string. I'm going to call this string image URL. And this will be equal to, we're going to return to Open Weather Map website, and we're going to copy this. So to be able to make use of this URL, we are going to edit the suffix and replace it with our appropriate icon ID. So let's copy this and go back to our Visual Studio. I'm going to paste this here. So we're going to change the suffix. We're going to pass our icon. And also we're going to concatenate it with .png. So this will be our appropriate image URL. Now the next thing to do will be to go ahead and make use of the web request. So I'm going to say system.net.webRequest. So I'm going to call this request, and this will be equal to default. So we've successfully defined our web request. Now we're going to go ahead and say request. Okay, so this will just go ahead and simplify our naming for us. So we don't want to always be typing system.net.webRequest. So you just go ahead and use web request. We're going to say .create. We're going to pass it our image URL. Okay. So this will go ahead and create our request. Now the next thing to do will be to set up a timeout. So we're going to go ahead and say request.timeout. So in case you want to set a timeout to your request, this is how to do that. So I don't have any timeout in mind. I can just go ahead and say int.massValue. And also we can go ahead and set the request method, right? So this will be a get request. There are 4 different request methods. So a request could actually be a get request, a post request, a put request, and a delete request. So what the get means that you want to fetch data or information from the API, right? So for example, as we want to download our icon image, that is an example of a get request because we want to get something from the API. A post method will mean that you want to send information to the API, right? Let's say for instance, we want to save our biodata to an API. That API call will be a post request because we are actually sending information to the API. Now, delete request, like the name says, is when you want to delete something from the API. And put request means that you want to edit an item or you want to overwrite data using the API. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and continue. We're going to go ahead and define a new web response. And I'm going to call this response. This will be equal to default response. So our web response will be equal to request.getResponse. But we want this to be asynchronous. We don't want it to run on the main thread. We don't want our application to be glitchy when we are trying to get a response. So we have to make it asynchronous, right? So if you make it asynchronous, means that we have to add await signature, which is what we have here. So now that we have our response, what do we want to do with it? So I'm going to go ahead and define a new memory stream. Okay, so we have to resolve this. So this memory stream, I'm going to call it ms. This will be equal to new memory stream. So the next thing we need to do will be to say response, get response stream, dot copy to memory stream. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with this, after which I will explain why we had to use a memory stream. So I'm going to define a new byte array, and I'm going to call it image data. This will be equal to ms.toArray. Using the memory stream makes it easier for us to convert whatever that we receive from the API to a byte array. And byte array makes it easier for us to decode it into a bitmap. And when we have access to a bitmap, it means that we can go ahead and set it to an image view. So we're going to go ahead and do all of that. So I'm going to have bitmap. I'm going to call this bitmap. This will be equal to bitmap factory dot decode byte array, and we're going to pass it our image data, and the offset will be 0, and the length will be image data dot length. Boom. So this will give us access to our bitmap, and finally we're going to say whether image view dot set bitmap, set image bitmap, and we're going to go ahead and pass our bitmap to this method. Boom. So this is all we need to do. Now to verify that everything works just the way we expected it, I'm going to go ahead and run our app. Boom. Okay, so let's go ahead and search for London. London seems like my most favorite place right now. So we're going to go ahead and click on check weather. So let's pay attention to the image view. Boom. So as you can see, we now have a new image, right? So this image explains broken clouds. So I'm going to go ahead and check weather condition in Washington. Boom. So we have a clear sky in Washington, D.C. So let's check what's happening in Munich. Munich should be in Germany. Seems we also have a clear sky there. So this is how to use WebRequest to fetch images through an API. So this will be all for now. See you in the next class.